The last thing my daughter said before locking me inside my own house on my 67th birthday was, "Mom, please don't hate me." Then I heard the deadbolt click. I ran to the front door, pounding with both fists as panic rushed through my chest. Through the glass, I watched Olivia Carter wipe away tears before walking toward her car without looking back. In my trembling hands rested the tiny gift box she had insisted I open only after she was gone. I had no idea that inside that little box was the first piece of a truth that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family and save my life. If this story touches your heart, I'd truly appreciate it if you gave it a like. Subscribe if you enjoy emotional family stories that remind us how complicated love can be. And before we begin, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own child had locked you inside your home on your birthday? I'd love to read your thoughts. 5 years before that birthday, I buried the love of my life. Michael West had been my husband for 42 years, my best friend for even longer, and the kind of man who believed every problem could be solved with patience, kindness, and a good cup of coffee. He built bridges across Texas for a living, but what he really built was a family that always felt safe, or at least I believed it was safe. After his funeral, everyone kept asking me the same question: "Will you move in with Olivia?" The answer was always no. I loved my daughter more than anyone else in the world, but Michael and I had spent decades turning our modest brick house on the west side of Austin into our home. Every scratch on the hardwood floor reminded me of a birthday party. Every flower in the backyard had been planted together, and every photograph hanging on the walls carried a memory that refused to fade. Leaving that house would have felt like losing Michael all over again. Besides, I wasn't helpless. At 67, I was healthy enough to drive cook garden volunteer at the local library and spoil my only granddaughter every chance I got. Life was quieter after Michael died, but it wasn't empty. Every Sunday afternoon, Olivia and her family usually came over for lunch, or at least they used to. When Olivia was little, she had been attached to my side like my own shadow. If I baked cookies, she stood on a chair beside me. If I planted tomatoes, she dug tiny holes with plastic gardening tools. If I cried after losing my own mother, she climbed into my lap and whispered, "I'll always take care of you, Mommy." She was only 7 years old. Even now I could still hear her little voice. That promise had stayed with me through every stage of her life: college, her first apartment, her wedding, the birth of Lily. Every milestone reminded me that no matter how old she became, she would always be my little girl. Then Daniel entered the picture. The first time I met him, I honestly liked him. He was confident without seeming arrogant. He remembered everyone's name. He sent flowers after our first dinner together. He laughed at Michael's terrible dad jokes. He even helped me repair my back fence one weekend before he and Olivia were married. If someone had told me then that one day I would fear that man, I would have laughed. Daniel worked in commercial real estate. He always talked about investments, market trends, and opportunities. Michael enjoyed those conversations. I usually tuned them out. Numbers had never interested me very much. After Michael passed away, Daniel became surprisingly attentive. He called every few days. "Emily, do you need groceries? Emily, let me check your smoke detectors. Emily, I'll take care of your taxes." At first, I thought I had been blessed with a caring son-in-law. Looking back now, I realize every visit ended the same way. His eyes wandered around the house. He asked innocent questions. "Did Michael keep important papers here? Do you still have all the property documents?" "Have you updated your will?" I always answered honestly. "I think everything is somewhere in the house. I haven't looked through all Michael's files." "I'll organize them someday." Daniel would simply smile. "There's no rush." But there had been a rush. I just hadn't known it. Around the same time, Olivia began changing. Not dramatically, just enough for a mother to notice. She canceled Sunday lunches. She answered text messages hours later, sometimes days later. Whenever we met, she looked exhausted. Dark circles settled beneath her eyes. She smiled less. She hugged me tighter, almost desperately. I blamed her workload. She blamed deadlines. Daniel blamed the economy. None of us spoke about what was really happening, Or perhaps everyone except me already knew. Lily remained the bright light in every visit. She was 10 years old now, curious about everything, always carrying a sketchbook wherever she went. One afternoon, she handed me a drawing. It showed 3 women standing together, a little girl, a younger woman, an older woman. Above them, she had written in colorful letters, "The West Girls." I laughed. "What about Grandpa?" She smiled. "He's the star watching over all of us." I framed that picture. It still hangs in my hallway. About 3 weeks before my birthday, Olivia called unexpectedly. "Mom, how about letting me plan your birthday this year?" I was surprised. "You've been so busy." "I know," she answered quietly. "That's exactly why I want to." There was something strange about her voice, like she was trying not to cry. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine." "Are you sure?" A long silence followed. Then she laughed. "I'm just tired." I wanted to believe her. What mother wouldn't? Over the next several days, little things kept happening. Daniel stopped by twice without calling first. Once he asked if I had ever considered selling my house. Another time he casually mentioned how expensive property had become around Austin. "You could retire somewhere nicer," he said. "I already live somewhere nice." He smiled politely. "You know what I mean." No, I didn't. Not then. A week before my birthday, my attorney, Linda Morales, left me a voicemail. She asked me to return her call regarding some paperwork Michael had left years ago. I made a mental note, then forgot. I wish I hadn't. The night before my birthday, Olivia texted me. "Please don't invite anyone else tomorrow," I frowned. "What about Mrs. Henderson from next door? Just family this year." It felt odd. Mrs. Henderson had attended nearly every birthday dinner since Michael died. Still, I agreed. Family sounded perfect. Now standing inside my locked house with the tiny gift box still unopened in my hands, every one of those strange conversations replayed inside my mind. They no longer felt random. They felt connected. My heartbeat quickened. I forced myself to stay calm. There had to be another way out. I hurried to the kitchen. The back door wouldn't budge. Locked. I tried the garage entrance. Locked. Even the small side gate leading into the backyard had been secured with a heavy padlock I had never seen before. A chill crawled down my spine. Olivia hadn't simply locked the front door. She had made sure I couldn't leave. I pressed my forehead against the kitchen window and searched the quiet street. Her car was gone. The neighborhood looked completely normal. Children rode bicycles. A mail truck rolled past. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower hummed beneath the Texas sun. Everything outside appeared peaceful. Inside my house, however, my heart was beating so hard I could barely breathe. I looked back at the tiny gift box resting in my trembling hands. For the first time, I realized something that made my stomach tighten with fear. Whatever was inside, Olivia believed it was more important than explaining why she had just imprisoned her own mother. I stared at the tiny gift box for what felt like an eternity. It was no bigger than the palm of my hand, wrapped in plain cream-colored paper with a faded blue ribbon tied into a neat bow. It wasn't expensive. In fact, it looked as though Olivia had wrapped it herself, just like she used to when she was a little girl, and insisted on making every birthday present special. My fingers trembled as I loosened the ribbon. "Please let this make sense," I whispered to the empty room. Inside lay 3 objects. The first was an old silver key. It was heavier than I expected, slightly worn around the edges with an engraved letter M on the handle. Michael. My heart skipped a beat. The second item was a small black flash drive. No label, no markings, just a plain USB drive. The third was a folded piece of stationery. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Olivia's. I unfolded it carefully. Only one short message was written across the page. "Mom, if you're reading this before 6:00 p.m., do not leave this house. No matter who comes, no matter what they tell you, trust me one last time. I love you, Olivia." I read those words once, then again, then a third time. Trust me one last time. One last time. Why would she write something like that? Had she believed I no longer trusted her? The thought hurt more than I wanted to admit. I lowered myself onto the living room sofa, trying to make sense of everything. If Olivia was trying to protect me, why hadn't she simply told me the truth? Why stage something so frightening? Why lock me inside instead of calling the police? Questions flooded my mind faster than I could answer them. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. I hesitated. It stopped ringing. Almost immediately, another call came. Unknown number. I rejected it. A third call followed, then a fourth. Within 2 minutes, my screen displayed 12 missed calls from different numbers. A cold knot formed in my stomach. That wasn't normal. I switched my phone to silent. Almost instantly, a text message appeared. Mrs. West, this is regarding urgent banking documentation. Please answer immediately. I frowned. I hadn't contacted my bank. Another message arrived. Failure to respond today could result in serious financial consequences. Before I could even process it, another notification appeared. We are outside your residence. I looked up so quickly my neck ached. Outside, slowly, I walked toward the front window, careful to stay behind the curtain. A dark gray SUV had pulled into my driveway. 2 men stepped out. Both wore navy jackets with identification badges clipped to their pockets. One carried a leather briefcase. The other held a tablet. From a distance, they looked completely professional. One of them walked confidently toward my front porch. Knock, knock, knock. 3 calm, measured knocks. Mrs. Emily West, a man's voice called. I'd like to speak with you regarding your financial accounts. I didn't answer. Another knock. We're from Lone Star Community Bank. My eyebrows knitted together. I didn't even bank with Lone Star Community Bank. I stayed silent. The man continued. We've been trying to reach you by phone. That explained the missed calls. We just need a few signatures. Signatures. Daniel's voice echoed in my memory. You should really organize your paperwork someday. Have you updated your documents? Let me know if you ever need help signing anything. At the time, those questions had sounded caring. Now they sounded different. Much different. The man knocked again. This will only take 5 minutes. I moved closer to the window. Which bank did you say you're from? He smiled politely. Lone Star Community Bank. I don't have an account there. His smile barely changed. We're handling a transfer involving another institution. Transfer. What kind of transfer? It's easier if we explain inside. No. He paused, then smiled again. I understand your concern. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. We have legal paperwork requiring your immediate attention. I noticed something odd. He never once mentioned my account number, my address, any identifying information, just vague statements. My years as a teacher had taught me something important. When people avoid specifics, they're usually hiding something. I'd like you to leave, I said firmly. His smile disappeared. Mrs. West, if you refuse to cooperate, this could affect your assets. Assets. Not account, not bank, assets. A strange uneasiness settled over me. I'll contact my attorney. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. There's no need for lawyers. That single sentence told me everything. Real bankers never discouraged attorneys. I stepped away from the window. The knocking became louder, much louder. Bang, bang, bang. Mrs. West. No answer. Bang. We know you're inside. I backed farther into the hallway. My pulse hammered in my ears. For several long moments, the knocking stopped. I peeked through the curtain again. The 2 men stood beside their SUV speaking quietly. One pointed toward my backyard. The other shook his head. Then both looked directly at my house. Watching. Waiting. As though they weren't planning to leave anytime soon. I hurried into the kitchen. The backyard was empty. The fence stood 6 feet high. The gate remained locked from the outside. Olivia had somehow known exactly where they would come from. I looked back at the flash drive. Maybe it held the answers. But another thought stopped me. What if it contained something I wasn't ready to see? What if it proved Olivia had done something illegal, or worse? What if it proved she really had betrayed me? Tears blurred my vision. I hated myself for even thinking it. Olivia had been my entire world since the day she was born. I still remembered rocking her through sleepless nights after ear infections. helping her practice multiplication tables, driving across Texas to watch her college graduation, holding her hand when Lily was born. She wasn't just my daughter, she was my greatest joy. So why was I doubting her now? Because she had locked me inside. Because she refused to explain. Because nothing about today made sense. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of tires crunching against gravel. Another vehicle. Carefully, I looked through the side window. A white pickup truck had parked behind the SUV. A third man climbed out. Unlike the others, he wore a neatly pressed gray suit. He carried a slim black briefcase. The first two men immediately walked toward him. They spoke for less than a minute. Then all three turned simultaneously and looked directly at my front door. I instinctively stepped backward. Seconds later, the doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then came a calm, authoritative voice. "Mrs. West, my name is Richard Collins. I'm here regarding the documents your late husband left behind." The blood drained from my face. Michael's documents. How could a complete stranger possibly know about them? And more importantly, who had told him they even existed? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "My name is Richard Collins. I'm here regarding the documents your late husband left behind." The sentence echoed through my mind like a warning siren. Only a handful of people even knew Michael had left important paperwork. Me, Michael's attorney, Linda Morales, and Daniel. I felt a wave of nausea. I remained perfectly still, hoping the man outside would think the house was empty. Instead, the doorbell rang again. Then came another knock. Not violent, patient, calculated. "Mrs. West," the man called. "I know you're home." Silence. "I'd really appreciate just 5 minutes of your time." Still, I didn't answer. I glanced at Olivia's note again. "No matter who comes, no matter what they tell you, trust me one last time." Her words suddenly carried much more weight. The stranger outside wasn't talking about bank accounts anymore. He was talking about Michael's documents, how I carefully peeked through the narrow gap between the curtains. Richard Collins looked to be in his early 50s. Gray suit, polished black shoes, silver watch, expensive haircut. He appeared respectable, exactly the kind of man people instinctively trusted. But something about his posture bothered me. He wasn't looking around like someone visiting a client's home. He was studying the windows, watching, measuring, waiting, like a hunter waiting for prey to make a mistake. The two men from the SUV stood several yards behind him, pretending to review paperwork while constantly glancing toward the house. None of them seemed impatient anymore. That frightened me more than if they had been shouting. Professionals don't rush. Professionals wait. My phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was Daniel. I stared at his name until the call almost ended. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello." "Emily," he exclaimed, sounding breathless. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. I've had dozens of calls." "I know. Listen carefully." His voice sounded urgent. "Some people may come to your house today. They're already here." A brief pause. "Don't worry," he replied quickly. "They're probably from the bank." "Probably. I mean, that's what I was told." "You were told by whom?" Another pause. "I've been making a few calls." Something felt wrong. Daniel was usually smooth, confident. Today he sounded like he was building each sentence one word at a time. "I don't need to sign anything," I said. "I know." "Then why are they here?" "They're just verifying some records." "What records?" Silence. "Daniel, you know, property records." There it was again, property, not bank accounts, not taxes, property. I tightened my grip on the phone. Why would strangers know about my property? They're helping organize Michael's estate. My husband's been dead for 5 years. Daniel laughed awkwardly. "You know how paperwork is." No, I didn't. And apparently, neither did he, because probate had been completed years ago. I remembered sitting beside Linda Morales in her office. Everything had been finalized. There was nothing left to organize. "You should open the door," Daniel said. "I don't think so. They're professionals." "I'll wait for Linda." Another silence. This one lasted longer. When Daniel finally spoke again, his voice had changed. It was calmer, colder. "Emily." "Yes." Sometimes waiting creates bigger problems. The sentence sent a chill through me. It sounded less like advice, more like a warning. I'll decide that myself. Without another word, I ended the call. Immediately, my phone rang again. Daniel. I rejected it. Again rejected. Again rejected. Finally, the calls stopped. Outside, Richard Collins looked down at his own phone. Seconds later, he walked toward the SUV and spoke quietly with the other two men. One of them nodded. Then all three looked toward my house at exactly the same time. My stomach tightened. They had been speaking with Daniel. I was almost certain of it now. I stepped away from the window before they could see me. The house suddenly felt too quiet. The ticking grandfather clock in the hallway sounded louder than ever. Tick, tick, tick. Every second seemed to stretch forever. I walked into Michael's old study. Very little had changed since his death. His leather chair still sat behind the oak desk. His reading glasses rested beside an unfinished crossword puzzle. One bookshelf contained dozens of engineering manuals he had refused to throw away. Sometimes I came in here just to feel close to him. Today, for the first time, the room felt different, as if Michael had left something important behind. I remembered the flash drive. Maybe it held the answers. I retrieved my laptop from the desk drawer and inserted the USB. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a single folder appeared. Its name froze me in place. If Mom opens this, only one video file. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I clicked play. The screen remained black for several seconds. Then Olivia appeared. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked exhausted. She stared directly into the camera. "If you're watching this..." She stopped to wipe away tears. "Then everything has gone exactly the way I hoped it wouldn't." My chest tightened. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I know you're scared. I know you're angry. I know you probably think I've betrayed you." She inhaled shakily. "But please, don't stop watching." Suddenly, she looked over her shoulder as though afraid someone might enter the room. When she faced the camera again, her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Daniel has been lying to us for months," I gasped. "He isn't trying to help you. He's trying to find something Dad hid before he died." Another pause. "I couldn't tell you the truth because every phone call, every text, every conversation might have been monitored." I frowned. "Monitored by whom?" Olivia continued. "I don't know who to trust anymore. If Daniel realizes I told you anything, he'll know I betrayed him." The recording suddenly glitched. Static flashed across the screen. Then the video resumed. "I need you to remember one thing. No matter what anyone tells you today, the documents they're looking for are not inside your house." I stared at the screen. Not inside the house. Then why were those men outside? The answer came almost immediately. Because they believed they were. Olivia leaned closer to the camera. "If they can't find them, they'll try to make you believe you misplaced them. They'll pressure you. They'll confuse you. They may even pretend they're helping." A loud bang exploded against my front door. I jumped so violently the laptop nearly fell from the desk. Another bang, even louder. Then another. Someone was no longer knocking. Someone was trying to force me to answer. Olivia's frightened face remained frozen on the screen as another crash echoed through the house. Then I heard a voice outside. Not Richard Collins, not Daniel. A different man shouted, "Search around back." My blood turned to ice. They weren't waiting anymore. They were preparing to come inside. The words outside hit me harder than the pounding on the front door. "Search around back." Every instinct told me to run. But there was nowhere to run. The front door was blocked. The back gate had been locked from the outside. The garage door wouldn't open. I was trapped exactly where Olivia had wanted me to be. For the first time since she drove away, I understood something that chilled me to the bone. She hadn't locked me inside because she wanted to control me. She had locked me inside because she knew someone else wanted to get in. Another violent bang rattled the front door. I quickly muted my laptop and lowered the screen halfway. The study suddenly felt too exposed. If someone managed to enter the house, this would be the first room they'd search. Michael had always kept important papers here. or at least that's what everyone believed. I unplugged the flash drive and slipped it into my pocket. My hands shook so badly that I nearly dropped it. Then I heard footsteps. Not inside the house. Outside. One pair moved along the side of the house toward the backyard. Another remained on the front porch. They were splitting up, exactly as Olivia had warned. I crouched beneath the study window just enough to peek outside. The man in the gray suit, Richard Collins, was calmly speaking into his phone. His expression was no longer polite. His face had hardened into something cold and impatient. "I don't care what Daniel said," he muttered. "If she's inside, the documents are inside." Daniel. There it was. Hearing his name spoken aloud erased the last tiny piece of doubt I'd been holding on to. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Daniel knew these men. Maybe he had sent them. My stomach twisted. How long had he been planning this? Months, years? Another memory surfaced without warning. Nearly 8 months earlier, Daniel had insisted on helping me organize boxes in the attic. At the time, I'd been grateful. We spent nearly 3 hours carrying old photo albums, Christmas decorations, and Michael's engineering books downstairs. Twice I caught Daniel wandering away from the boxes we were sorting. "I was just looking for the bathroom," he'd said. Except the bathroom was downstairs, not in Michael's study. At the time, I hadn't questioned it. Now every small incident seemed to fit together like pieces of a terrible puzzle. I remembered another afternoon. Daniel had asked an oddly specific question while helping me replace a broken smoke detector. Did Michael ever use a safe? No. What about hidden compartments? I had laughed. What is this treasure hunt? He smiled. You'd be surprised what people hide. I thought he was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. A sharp crack echoed from the backyard. I hurried toward the kitchen window. One of the men was testing the locked gate. He rattled it several times before stepping back. The padlock held. He spoke into a small radio clipped to his belt. A moment later, Richard walked around the side of the house to inspect it himself. Neither man looked worried. They looked determined, as if they had all day. I returned to the laptop. Olivia's recording had paused where I'd stopped it. I pressed play again. She took a long breath before continuing. "If you're watching this, it means they came exactly when I expected." Tears welled in my eyes. She had predicted every minute of this nightmare. "I need you to understand something, Mom. I didn't discover Daniel's plan all at once. It happened little by little." The video cut to several short clips. Some had clearly been recorded secretly with a phone hidden inside a purse. The first showed Daniel sitting inside his office with 2 unfamiliar men. The audio was muffled but understandable. "She's alone now," Daniel said. "Old people eventually forget where they keep things." One of the men laughed. "And if she doesn't?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Then we'll convince her she signed everything already." My chest tightened. Another clip began. This one was inside Daniel's SUV. Only his voice could be heard. "The land's worth over $20 million now." $20 million, I stared at the screen. Michael had bought that property decades ago for what I remembered being little more than a risky investment. Could it really be worth that much now? The second man asked, "You're sure she's the only legal owner?" Daniel nodded confidently. "My father-in-law died before updating anything. Once we control the original documents, everything else becomes easy." My breathing became shallow. Original documents. Not money, not jewelry, not my house. Those documents. Another clip appeared. Olivia's voice this time. "You promised me we'd never involve my mother." Daniel smiled. "I promised we'd take care of her." "That's not the same thing. You worry too much. I know exactly how to handle elderly people." I felt physically ill. The man who had spent years calling me Mom had apparently spent those same years studying how to manipulate me. The recording ended briefly before another video loaded. This one looked different. Olivia wasn't hiding anymore. She sat inside a parked car. Rain streaked across the windshield. Her eyes were red. "I contacted the FBI 6 months ago." She swallowed hard. "They already suspected Daniel's group was stealing property from senior citizens." My heart skipped. Senior citizens, not just me. There are dozens of victims. She lowered her head. "Maybe more." A photo appeared beside her, an elderly couple, smiling, holding hands. The image dissolved into another, a widow, perhaps 70, standing in front of an empty lot. Another, an older veteran sitting alone on a porch. Another, a woman crying outside a courthouse. "I've met some of them," Olivia whispered. "They all trusted someone." Her voice cracked. A son, a grandson, a caregiver, a financial advisor. They never imagined the betrayal would come from family. Neither had I. Another loud impact shook the house. This time it came from the back door. The men had moved behind the house. Someone twisted the doorknob repeatedly. When it refused to open, the pounding began. Bang, bang, bang. I froze. Then my phone vibrated. Not an unknown number, not Daniel. Linda Morales. I answered immediately. "Linda." "Emily," she said quickly. "Listen to me carefully. Do not open your door." "I wasn't planning to." "Good." Her voice was unusually tense. "I've been trying to reach you for over an hour." "There are men outside." "I know." "Olivia called me early this morning." My heart leaped. "Have you spoken to her?" "Briefly." "Is she safe?" A pause. "I believe so." Believe, not know. Fear gripped me again. "Emily, I don't have much time. I need you to answer one question. Anything. Did Michael ever give you a silver key?" I instinctively reached into the tiny gift box still resting on the coffee table. "Yes." "Good. Don't lose it." "What does it open?" I can't explain over the phone." "Linda, you must trust Olivia." "I do." "No," she replied gently. "You want to. But in the next few hours, and you're going to find out just how much your daughter has sacrificed to keep you alive." Before I could ask another question, the call disconnected. I stared at the silent phone. Then from somewhere near the front of the house, I heard Richard Collins shout with unmistakable frustration. "If the papers aren't in the study, then tear the whole house apart." The moment Richard Collins shouted, "If the papers aren't in the study, then tear the whole house apart," I felt every ounce of strength leave my body. They weren't here to scare me. They were here to search. And if they couldn't find what they wanted, what would they do to me? I pressed my back against the wall of Michael's study, forcing myself to breathe slowly. "No," I whispered. "Think, Emily, don't panic." That was what Michael always used to say whenever life became overwhelming. Panic clouds judgment. Calm uncovers answers. I closed my eyes for just a second. When I opened them again, I looked around his study differently, not as a grieving widow preserving memories. As someone searching for clues, the silver key rested on the desk beside the laptop. Its worn surface reflected the afternoon sunlight filtering through the curtains. The engraved letter M suddenly caught my attention. It wasn't simply carved into the metal. It was surrounded by tiny engraved branches, oak leaves. Michael loved oak trees. Our first house had been built beneath one. The wooden rocking chair on our front porch had been carved from fallen oak. Even the cedar chest upstairs had an oak leaf carved into each corner. The cedar chest. I froze. Olivia's note. "If you're reading this before 6 p.m., not now." She had specifically written before 6 p.m. She wanted me to wait. There had to be a reason. Another crash came from the back of the house. Glass shattered. I jumped. They had broken one of the basement windows. I hurried to the hallway and looked toward the kitchen. I couldn't see anyone yet, but I could hear voices. "They're reinforced. Try another one. Check the basement." One man laughed. "She's probably hiding in there." I hurried back into the study and quietly locked the door. It wouldn't stop determined men forever, but it might buy me a few minutes. I returned to Olivia's recording. Another video began automatically. This one had clearly been recorded several months earlier. Olivia sat across from a man in a plain office. He wore a navy jacket with yellow letters embroidered over the chest. FBI. Special Agent Nathan Brooks. His expression remained calm, professional. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "we need you to understand the risk." "I do. If your husband discovers you're cooperating with us..." "I know. He may become violent." Olivia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared down at her wedding ring. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "He already has." My heart stopped. Violent Daniel. She slowly rolled up the sleeve of her blouse. dark bruises covered her forearm. I gasped so loudly that I instinctively covered my mouth. No, not my Olivia. Not the little girl who used to run barefoot through my garden. Agent Brooks leaned forward. Did he do this? She nodded. Because I questioned him. The room fell silent. Then the agent asked the question I never imagined hearing. Has Daniel ever threatened your mother's life? Olivia looked away. Tears streamed down her face. Not directly. But, she struggled to finish the sentence, he keeps saying that older people disappear every day. I felt the blood drain from my face. Disappear. Not lose money. Disappear. Another memory slammed into me. About 4 months earlier, Daniel had been helping me replace the batteries in my smoke detectors. Out of nowhere, he had smiled and said, "You know, Emily, people your age should really consider assisted living." I had laughed. "I like my house." He smiled back. "Everyone says that." At the time, I thought he was making conversation. Now I heard the hidden meaning. He hadn't wanted me comfortable. He wanted me gone. The video continued. Agent Brooks spread several photographs across the table. Even from my laptop screen, I could make out elderly faces, some smiling, some frightened. One picture showed a modest farmhouse. Another showed an empty wheelchair beside a hospital bed. "We've identified 23 confirmed victims," Brooks said. "We suspect there are many more." He pointed toward one photograph. "This gentleman transferred ownership of his ranch 2 weeks before he died." Another. "This widow signed away 3 rental properties after being convinced she had unpaid taxes." Another. "This couple disappeared after refusing to cooperate." Olivia covered her mouth. "What happened to them?" "We're still trying to find out." A knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't merely fraud. This organization destroyed lives, families, entire futures. Then Agent Brooks asked a question that changed everything. "Where are the original West property documents?" Olivia hesitated. "I honestly don't know." "What did your husband tell you?" "He believes they're hidden somewhere inside Mom's house." "And you?" She slowly shook her head. "My father was smarter than that." I smiled through tears. Yes, Michael had always been careful, painfully careful. He once kept our emergency cash inside an old coffee tin labeled garden fertilizer, because as he liked to joke, burglars never garden. If he had hidden something truly valuable, he would never choose the obvious place. The recording shifted again. This time Olivia was alone in her car. Night surrounded her. Streetlights reflected across the windshield. "I've searched every room without Mom noticing." She wiped away tears. "I hate lying to her. I hate pretending Daniel can still be trusted. But if I tell her the truth, he'll know." She looked directly into the camera. "So I have to let her hate me." The sentence pierced my heart. I'd rather lose my mother's trust than lose my mother. I burst into tears. Every cold conversation, every canceled visit, every unanswered phone call, every forced smile. She hadn't been pulling away because she stopped loving me. She'd been carrying a secret too dangerous to share, and she'd been carrying it alone. I remembered every moment I'd secretly wondered if I'd done something wrong. Every lonely birthday dinner, every Christmas when she left early, every Mother's Day when she seemed distracted. She wasn't choosing Daniel over me. She was trying to keep me alive. A loud scraping noise echoed through the hallway. Someone had reached the back door. Metal groaned. Wood splintered. They were trying to pry it open. I shut the laptop. There wasn't time for more. The recordings had answered one question. Olivia loved me. More than I'd realized, but they had raised another. If the documents weren't inside the house, where were they? I looked again at the silver key, then around Michael's study, his desk, his bookshelves, the framed photographs, the old grandfather clock standing beside the fireplace. Suddenly, another memory surfaced. Nearly 10 years ago, Michael had been polishing that very clock when he smiled at me and said, "If anything ever happens to me, remember this." He gently tapped the side of the clock. "Time protects the truth." At the time, I laughed because it sounded like one of his strange engineering riddles. Now my eyes slowly drifted toward the antique clock. The silver key felt unexpectedly warm in my trembling hand. Outside, another crash shook the house. Inside, I realized my husband might have left me one final message, hidden in plain sight for years. For years, I had walked past that grandfather clock without giving it more than a passing glance. Michael wound it every Sunday evening without fail. After he died, I hired a clockmaker once a year to keep it running because I couldn't bear the thought of letting it fall silent. Its steady ticking had become part of the house, as familiar as the creaking floorboards and the scent of cedar that lingered in the hallway. Now I stood in front of it with the silver key trembling between my fingers. Time protects the truth. Michael's words echoed in my mind. At the time, I had laughed and teased him for sounding like one of those mystery novels he loved to read. He had only smiled. You'll understand someday. I reached out and gently touched the polished walnut case. The clock was nearly 7 feet tall, handcrafted decades ago by Michael's grandfather. It had survived 3 moves, 2 floods, and one curious Labrador that had once knocked it halfway across the living room. Michael loved that clock almost as much as he loved me. Another loud bang came from somewhere behind the house. I flinched. The men were still trying to force their way inside. I looked at the clock again. If Michael had hidden something, it had to be quickly accessible. My eyes traveled over every inch of the cabinet. The brass pendulum swung steadily. Tick, 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 nothing unusual. Then I noticed something I had somehow never seen before. Just beneath the clock face was a tiny keyhole, barely visible unless the afternoon sunlight hit it from the right angle. My breath caught. The silver key. I slid it carefully into the lock. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, click. A soft mechanical sound echoed inside the wooden cabinet. I pulled gently. Instead of opening from the front as I expected, a narrow, hidden panel on the side of the clock slowly swung outward. My heart pounded. Behind it was a shallow compartment wrapped in dark blue velvet. Michael? My eyes filled with tears. Inside rested several carefully arranged items, a thick sealed envelope addressed in Michael's handwriting. For Emily. A leather-bound journal. A small stack of legal documents secured with a faded ribbon. And a second envelope marked, "Only open if someone tries to take what belongs to you." My hands shook so violently I had to sit on the floor. The pounding outside faded into the background. For a few precious moments, it felt as though Michael was sitting beside me again. I picked up the first envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. The seal cracked softly as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. His handwriting was unmistakable, steady, confident, comforting. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer sitting beside you complaining about how strong you make the coffee. That thought alone breaks my heart. First, I need you to know something. You made every ordinary day extraordinary. Thank you for giving me a life worth living. Now I need you to listen carefully. Several years ago, I discovered that the land I purchased outside Austin had become far more valuable than anyone expected. People talk. Records become public. Greed follows opportunity. I don't know who may someday learn about that property. Perhaps no one. But if someone does promise me one thing, never let fear make your decisions. Let truth guide you instead. The original ownership documents are not inside this house. They never were. I entrusted them to someone whose loyalty has already been tested. If the day ever comes when people begin searching our home, you'll know exactly why I made that decision. Trust the people who earn your trust, not the people who demand it. And one more thing. If Olivia is involved in any difficult choice, believe in her before you believe your own fear. She has more of your heart than she realizes. Forever yours, Michael. I couldn't stop crying. Even after 5 years, it felt as though my husband had reached across time to hold my hand. He had known, not the details, not Daniel, but he had understood human nature. He knew wealth attracted greed. He knew someone might eventually come looking. Most of all, he knew Olivia. A lump formed in my throat. Even years before she discovered Daniel's crimes, Michael had trusted her completely. I wiped my eyes and picked up the leather journal. Inside were dated entries spanning almost 15 years. Most described ordinary life, gardening, fishing trips, family vacations. Then one entry caught my attention. September 18th. Today I received another offer to sell the Austin property. Declined again. The caller somehow knew details that shouldn't have been public. Someone has been asking questions. I won't tell Emily yet. She deserves peace, not unnecessary worry. I turned another page. March 7th. Met with Linda Morales today. Finished the legal protections. If anything happens to me, she'll know what to do. Emily will probably complain that I've become paranoid. I hope she's right. Tears blurred the words. Linda. She had known all along. No wonder she sounded so urgent on the phone. I reached for the second envelope, the one labeled Only Open if someone tries to take what belongs to you. Inside were certified copies of legal filings, trust documents, and a notarized letter. One paragraph immediately caught my eye. The original deed ownership certificates and supporting records are secured in the custody of attorney Linda Morales under sealed client privilege. No duplicate originals remain inside my residence. I stared at the page. So that was it. The men outside were searching for documents that had never been here. They had been chasing a ghost. A desperate laugh escaped my lips. Daniel had spent years manipulating me, questioning me, sending strangers to my house. All because he believed something was hidden within these walls. He had been wrong from the very beginning. Another loud crash echoed through the kitchen. This time it was followed by the unmistakable sound of splintering wood. The back door. They had broken through. My pulse skyrocketed. Voices filled the house. Clear the kitchen, check downstairs, move. They were inside. I hurriedly stuffed Michael's letters, the journal, and the legal papers back into the velvet compartment. I kept only the 2 envelopes and slipped them beneath my sweater. The flash drive remained safely inside my pocket. The silver key stayed in my hand. I carefully pushed the hidden panel closed. Click. The compartment disappeared so perfectly that no one would ever know it existed. Footsteps echoed from the kitchen, heavy, confident, drawing closer. I backed quietly toward the study door, barely daring to breathe. Then I heard Richard Collins' voice somewhere in the hallway. She's still here. A second man answered. How do you know? Richard chuckled. Because her car is still in the garage. A pause. Then came the words that froze my blood. Find the old woman. Find the old woman. Richard Collins' voice echoed through the hallway with terrifying calm. There was no panic in his tone, no hesitation, only confidence. He believed that there was no possible way I could escape, and for the moment, he was right. I eased the study door open just enough to look into the hallway. The house that Michael and I had built together was being invaded by strangers. One man was opening cabinet doors in the dining room. Another was pulling books from the living room shelves, letting them crash onto the hardwood floor. Family photographs lay scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. One frame containing our wedding picture shattered beneath a man's boot. I'd never felt so violated. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed silent. Olivia's words echoed inside my mind. No matter who comes, trust me. I slipped quietly back into the study and locked the door once more. It wouldn't stop them forever, but it might delay them long enough for me to think. My phone vibrated. A text message, unknown number. Don't let them see the silver key. I stared at the message. There was no signature, no explanation, only those 7 words. Before I could react, another message appeared. Delete this conversation immediately. My pulse quickened. Was it Olivia, Agent Brooks Linda? I had no way of knowing. Without thinking twice, I deleted both messages exactly as instructed. Someone was helping me. Someone who knew what was happening inside my house. Outside, the study drawers slammed shut, wood cracked, glass shattered. They've searched the kitchen. Nothing? Check the bedrooms. Richard's voice remained steady. Don't miss the attic. The attic. I remembered Daniel insisting on helping me organize it months earlier. He had searched it once already. Apparently, he wanted to search it again. A loud thud shook the study door. Someone had tried the handle. Locked. Another attempt. Then footsteps moved away. I exhaled quietly. Not yet. I looked around the room. There had to be another exit. Michael had renovated this house twice over the years. He often joked that he knew every nail hidden inside the walls. Then I remembered something. Years earlier, Michael had installed a narrow maintenance passage connecting the study closet to the unfinished storage room behind the garage. It wasn't a secret tunnel, just a service access used to reach plumbing and electrical wiring during renovations. Hardly anyone knew it existed. I hurried toward the closet. Behind winter coats and old vacuum attachments was a plain wooden panel secured with two simple latches. I opened them. The narrow passage was still there, dark, dusty, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Another crash echoed through the hallway. "They're in here!" A man's voice. The study. I climbed into the passage just as the study doorknob rattled violently. Bang, bang, bang. The lock wouldn't hold much longer. I quietly pulled the wooden panel closed behind me. Moments later, crack. The study door burst open. Light spilled through tiny gaps in the wooden panel. I held my breath. Footsteps entered, heavy, several men. "They've searched this room already." "Search it again." Books hit the floor. Desk drawers slammed. Furniture scraped across hardwood. Someone even knocked on the grandfather clock. My heart nearly stopped. Solid. "Move it. It weighs a ton." Another man grunted. "Forget it." I silently thanked Michael. The clock had weighed nearly 600 pounds since he reinforced its base years ago. No one was moving it without specialized equipment. Richard entered moments later. "Anything?" "No." He scanned the room. I could hear him walking closer to the closet. Closer, closer. He stopped directly in front of the hidden panel. I squeezed my eyes shut. "Please, not today." For several endless seconds, nothing happened. Then another voice called from the hallway. "Richard?" "What?" "We found something upstairs." His footsteps retreated immediately. The study emptied. Only after another full minute did I allow myself to breathe again. I slowly crawled through the cramped passage until I reached the storage room behind the garage. It smelled of sawdust and old paint. There were no windows, only a small vent overlooking the driveway. Carefully, I looked outside. 3 black SUVs had now parked near my house. More men had arrived. None wore police uniforms. None appeared concerned about being seen. Then I noticed something else. Across the street, an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, stood frozen beside her mailbox. She had clearly noticed the commotion. One of Richard's men walked calmly toward her. He showed her what looked like an identification badge. She nodded uncertainly. After speaking for less than a minute, she returned inside her house. Whatever he had shown her had convinced her everything was official. My heart sank. These people had planned everything. Another vehicle turned onto my street, a dark blue luxury SUV. Daniel. He stepped out wearing a worried expression. From the vent, I watched him hurry toward Richard. They embraced briefly. Not like strangers, like partners. Every remaining illusion disappeared. Daniel wasn't being manipulated. He wasn't caught in someone else's scheme. He belonged to it. I couldn't hear every word, but the storage vent carried enough of the conversation. "Did she find anything?" Daniel asked. Richard shook his head. "No." "Then where is it?" "I was hoping you'd tell me." Daniel rubbed both hands through his hair. "It has to be here." Richard's voice hardened. "You promised the originals were inside this house." "They should be." "Should." "I searched years ago." "Years ago." So that explained his strange behavior in the attic. He hadn't been helping me. He had already been searching. Richard stepped closer. "If this operation falls apart, you're cleaning up the mess." Daniel swallowed visibly. For the first time, he looked frightened. Before either man could speak again, the distant sound of sirens drifted through the neighborhood. Everyone froze. One of the men looked toward the street. "Police." Another shook his head. "Too far away." Richard remained calm. "Stay focused." Daniel, however, looked genuinely nervous. "What if they're coming here?" "They won't." "How do you know?" Richard smiled. "Because we planned for that." The confidence in his voice frightened me more than the sirens themselves. Whatever protection they believed they had, it made them unafraid of the police. Then another car appeared at the end of the street. This one was different. black, unmarked. It slowed as it approached my house. Daniel turned toward it. For the first time all day, I saw real fear spread across his face. Daniel's face turned pale as the black SUV rolled to a slow stop across the street. It wasn't flashy. No police markings, no flashing lights, just a clean black vehicle with heavily tinted windows. Richard Collins narrowed his eyes. Who invited them? One of the men shook his head. I've never seen that vehicle before. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw uncertainty spread through their group. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out wearing jeans, a dark windbreaker, and sunglasses despite the afternoon sun. From where I was hiding, he looked like any other middle-aged man. Then another door opened. My heart stopped. Olivia. She climbed out slowly, her shoulders tense, her eyes scanning the house before settling on the broken back door. Even from a distance, I could see she'd been crying. Daniel took one step toward her. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stood beside the man from the SUV. Richard walked forward, forcing a polite smile. "Can we help you?" The man calmly reached into his jacket. Every person in the yard tensed. Instead of pulling out a weapon, he held up a leather credential wallet. Though I couldn't read it through the small vent, I knew exactly what it was from Olivia's recordings. Special Agent Nathan Brooks. The color drained from Richard's face. Agent Brooks spoke in a measured voice. "Afternoon. No one's leaving." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Daniel laughed nervously. "There must be some misunderstanding. I was just checking on my mother-in-law." Agent Brooks looked at the shattered kitchen window, the broken back door, and the men scattered around my yard. "Is this how you normally check on family?" Daniel's smile faltered. Richard stepped forward. "My name is Richard Collins. I don't believe we have any legal obligation to remain here." "You do now," Brooks replied. Another black SUV pulled up behind the first, then another. Men and women dressed in plain clothes exited quickly, each wearing concealed tactical vests beneath light jackets. Several displayed FBI credentials. Within seconds, Richard's men subtly changed positions. Not to greet them, to prepare. My pulse raced. Was this about to become a shootout? Brooks raised one hand. "Nobody needs to make this worse." Richard forced a smile. "My associates and I are conducting legitimate business." Breaking into a private residence. "We had permission." Brooks glanced toward Daniel. "From whom?" Daniel opened his mouth. No words came out. Olivia finally spoke. "They never had my mother's permission." Her voice was steady, stronger than I'd heard in months. Daniel turned toward her in disbelief. "Olivia, you lied." "No," she interrupted, "you lied." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel's expression softened, almost pleading. "You don't understand." "I understand enough. I did this for us." Olivia shook her head. "No, you did it for yourself." Richard suddenly took a slow step backward. Agent Brooks noticed immediately. "Don't." Richard froze. Another agent approached from the opposite side, cutting off his retreat. Within moments, every exit from the property was covered. The operation had been planned carefully, methodically. Inside the storage room, I finally allowed myself to breathe. They had come. Olivia hadn't abandoned me. She had brought help. Then my phone vibrated. This time it was Linda Morales. I answered in a whisper. "Linda, Emily, I think the FBI is here." "They are." Relief flooded her voice. "Stay exactly where you are. I've been hiding." "Good. Can I come out now?" "Not yet," I frowned. "Why not?" "Because we still don't know whether everyone involved is outside." The reminder sent another chill through me. Richard hadn't been working alone. There could still be someone inside my house. I listened carefully. Sure enough. Footsteps, upstairs, very faint. Someone was still inside. I quietly ended the call. Outside, Brooks addressed Daniel again. "Mr. Carter, I'd like you to explain why we've recovered multiple communications between you and known members of an elder fraud organization." Daniel stared silently. "You have the wrong person." Brooks nodded. "Maybe." He reached into a folder. "Then perhaps you can explain these." He removed several photographs. Even from my hiding place, I couldn't make out the details. but Daniel recognized them immediately. His shoulders stiffened. Olivia closed her eyes. Brooks continued. We also have financial transfers, property records, recorded meetings, and witness testimony. Richard suddenly laughed. You don't have enough. Brooks looked directly at him. You'd be surprised. Another agent approached carrying several evidence bags. One contained a laptop, another held multiple cell phones, a third contained stacks of printed documents. Richard's confident smile slowly disappeared. At that exact moment, a loud crash echoed from inside my house. Everyone outside turned toward the sound. Brooks immediately signaled 2 agents. Inside, they ran toward the broken back door. I froze. Someone was still searching. Someone hadn't realized the FBI had arrived. The storage room door creaked softly. I looked over my shoulder. My heart nearly stopped. A man stood in the doorway. Not Richard, not Daniel. One of the men who had entered the house earlier. Apparently, he had searched room by room until reaching the garage. His eyes locked onto mine. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. So, there you are. He lunged toward me. I stumbled backward, clutching Michael's envelopes beneath my sweater. He grabbed my arm. Pain shot through my shoulder. Let go. I fought with every ounce of strength I had. He reached toward my pocket. The key. He wasn't trying to rob me. He knew exactly what he wanted. I twisted away, but he caught the edge of my sweater. The envelopes slipped free and scattered across the dusty floor. His eyes widened. Found them. No. He bent down to grab the papers. Before his fingers could touch them, FBI. A deafening shout filled the room. The man spun around. Special Agent Nathan Brooks stood in the doorway with 2 armed agents behind him. Step away from her. The attacker hesitated. Then he made the worst decision of his life. He reached inside his jacket. Brooks reacted instantly. Don't! The man ignored him. Within seconds, 3 agents tackled him to the concrete floor. The struggle lasted only moments before handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. I collapsed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. Agent Brooks hurried over. Mrs. West. I nodded weakly. Are you hurt? My voice broke. I think I'm okay. He helped me to my feet. Then, with surprising gentleness, he picked up Michael's scattered letters and placed them back into my trembling hands. Your daughter was right. He looked directly into my eyes. We got here just in time. My legs felt as though they no longer belonged to me. Agent Nathan Brooks steadied me before guiding me out of the storage room and into the garage. The afternoon sunlight felt almost unreal after hours of hiding in darkness. Take your time, he said gently. You've been through a great deal today. I nodded, still clutching Michael's envelopes against my chest, as if letting go would somehow erase him all over again. Outside, the quiet suburban street had transformed into an active federal investigation. Unmarked FBI vehicles lined both sides of the road. Agents photographed the broken windows and damaged doors. Evidence markers had already been placed throughout my front yard. Several neighbors stood behind yellow tape, whispering among themselves. Mrs. Henderson caught my eye. She covered her mouth with both hands when she saw me. I managed a small nod to let her know I was alive. Then my eyes found Olivia. The moment she saw me, tears filled her eyes. Mom! She took one hesitant step forward, then stopped. She looked as though she wanted to hug me more than anything in the world, yet feared I might reject her. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Months of distance, years of confusion, one terrible birthday. Everything stood between us. Finally, I crossed the remaining distance myself. I wrapped my arms around my daughter. She collapsed against me, sobbing. I'm so sorry, she whispered over and over. I'm so sorry. I held her tightly. No, she looked up confused. You don't apologize for saving my life. Her tears came even harder. I hated lying to you. I know. I wanted to tell you every day. I know. I thought you'd never forgive me. I gently brushed the hair away from her face. When this morning started, I didn't understand. But now I do. She buried her face against my shoulder like she had when she was a frightened little girl. For the first time in months, I felt my daughter was finally home. A sharp voice interrupted the moment. "This is ridiculous, Daniel." 2 FBI agents stood beside him, though he hadn't yet been handcuffed. His expensive suit was wrinkled. Sweat covered his forehead. He looked nothing like the confident businessman I had known. He pointed directly at Olivia. "She's lying." Brooks calmly approached. "No one's asked you any questions yet." Daniel ignored him. "Emily," he turned toward me desperately. "You know me. I've always taken care of you." I stared at him in silence. He took another step. "I've done everything for this family." Agent Brooks immediately blocked his path. "Stay where you are." Daniel raised both hands dramatically. "Fine." Then he looked back at me. "Emily, your daughter has been manipulated." Olivia laughed bitterly. "For once? Tell the truth." Daniel's expression hardened. "You think they're your friends?" He nodded toward the FBI agents. "They're using you." "No," Olivia answered quietly. "They're protecting people you tried to destroy." Daniel shook his head. "You have no proof." Brooks opened a thick evidence binder. "I was hoping you'd say that." He removed several printed transcripts. "Recorded meeting," another stack. "Bank transfers," another. "Property acquisition records." Then he held up a small digital recorder sealed inside an evidence bag. "And this." Daniel's confidence faltered. "What is it?" Brooks looked directly into his eyes. "A recording made 6 weeks ago." Olivia slowly closed her eyes. Daniel immediately understood. "You recorded me." She didn't answer. Brooks pressed a button. The recording played through a portable speaker. Daniel's own voice filled the quiet street. "Emily trusts me," another voice asked. "What if she refuses to sign?" Daniel laughed. "Then we'll convince her she's protecting her family." Another question. "And if she still refuses?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "Old people get confused. Confused people make mistakes. Mistakes are easy to exploit." The recording continued. "Once we have the original deed, everything else belongs to us." Silence spread across the front yard. Even the neighbors behind the tape stopped whispering. Daniel's face had turned completely white. Brooks switched off the recorder. "Would you like to explain that?" Daniel swallowed. "That recording is edited." Brooks smiled slightly. "We expected that response." He nodded toward another agent. A laptop was carried forward. The agent opened a forensic software program displaying audio waveforms. "Our laboratory has already authenticated the file." Another agent handed Brooks a folder. "The metadata confirms the recording has not been altered." Daniel looked from one agent to another. His confidence was evaporating. Richard Collins, standing several yards away with his hands restrained behind his back, suddenly spoke. "I never met this man." Daniel spun toward him. "What?" Richard shrugged. "I don't know him." Daniel stared in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me." Richard smiled coldly. "You wanted to play businessman." "I wanted to stay out of prison." Daniel understood immediately. Richard was sacrificing him. "No!" Daniel shouted. "You contacted me." Richard remained silent. "You recruited me." Still nothing. "You promised nobody would get hurt." Several agents exchanged quick glances. Brooks looked carefully at Daniel. "Nobody would get hurt." He repeated the words slowly. "So, you knew exactly what was happening." Daniel realized his mistake too late. "I didn't mean—" "You've said enough." Brooks nodded to 2 agents. They stepped forward. One removed a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click echoed across the yard. "Daniel Carter," Brooks said calmly. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, attempted theft, by deception, financial exploitation of elderly persons, obstruction of justice, and related federal offenses." The handcuffs closed around Daniel's wrists. He looked desperately toward me one final time. "Emily?" I met his gaze. For years, I had welcomed him into my home, trusted him with birthdays, Christmas dinners, family photographs. I had defended him when neighbors complained he seemed too ambitious. I had believed he loved my daughter. Now I saw only a stranger. "I treated you like a son," I said quietly. His eyes filled with panic. "I know." "No," I slowly shook my head. "You knew, and you tried to use that against me." He lowered his head. Not from remorse, from defeat. As agents escorted Daniel toward one of the SUVs, he suddenly turned back toward Olivia. "You destroyed this family." Olivia stood beside me without moving. "No." Her voice remained calm despite the tears in her eyes. "You destroyed it the day you chose greed over the people who loved you." Daniel said nothing else. The SUV door closed behind him. As it pulled away, I looked down at the silver key still resting in my hand. Michael had been right. Time had protected the truth. And now, at last, the truth had finally caught up with the man who believed he could steal not only my property, but my family. The weeks after Daniel's arrest passed in a blur of interviews, legal paperwork, and sleepless nights. For the first few days, I barely left my house. Although the FBI had repaired the broken doors and windows temporarily, every unexpected sound made me jump. If a delivery truck stopped outside, my heart raced. If someone knocked on the front door, I instinctively looked through every window before answering. Fear has a strange way of lingering long after the danger is gone. One morning, Olivia arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee, not to discuss the investigation, not to apologize again, just to sit with me. We settled onto the back porch where Michael and I had spent countless evenings watching the sunset. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Olivia smiled weakly. I forgot how peaceful it is back here. I looked toward Michael's old rose garden. He always said this porch could solve almost any problem. She laughed softly. He really did. The silence between us no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt healing. "I'm angry," I admitted after a while. She lowered her eyes. "I know, but not at you." She looked up in surprise. "I'm angry that you carried all of this by yourself." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I didn't think I had another choice. You always had me. I couldn't risk losing you." "You nearly did." She nodded slowly. "I know." Then she reached across the small table and took my hand. "I'll never keep something like this from you again." I squeezed her fingers gently. "And I'll never doubt your love again." For the first time since Michael died, I felt our family beginning to mend. A month later, I received a subpoena to testify in federal court. Walking into the courthouse felt surreal. I had served on jury duty years earlier, but standing as a witness in a criminal trial was something entirely different. Reporters waited outside. Camera crews lined the sidewalk. The case had attracted national attention because investigators had uncovered a criminal organization operating across several states, targeting elderly homeowners with valuable property. Inside the courtroom, I saw Daniel for the first time since his arrest. He looked thinner. His expensive tailored suits had been replaced by a plain, jail-issued outfit beneath a borrowed blazer. His confident posture was gone. He avoided looking at me. Richard Collins sat several seats away with his own attorneys. He appeared calm, but there was a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there before. Then more people entered the courtroom. Elderly men and women. Some walked with canes. Others used wheelchairs. A few held the hands of their adult children. I recognized several faces from the photographs Olivia had shown me. Victims, dozens of lives connected by the same betrayal. The prosecutor began by explaining the scope of the investigation. Over 4 years, Daniel and his associates had allegedly identified vulnerable seniors who owned valuable land or property. They gathered personal information, built trust, created fake financial emergencies, forged documents, pressured victims into signing paperwork they didn't understand. When deception failed, intimidation often followed. As I listened, I realized how close I had come to becoming another name on that list. One witness after another took the stand. An 81-year-old retired firefighter described losing the ranch that had been in his family for 3 generations. A widow from San Antonio explained how she had been convinced she owed hundreds of thousands of dollars in non-existent taxes. Another elderly man broke down while describing how his own nephew had introduced him to one of Richard's associates. The betrayal had not only stolen their property, it had stolen their ability to trust. When my name was called, my knees felt weak. I walked slowly to the witness stand and took the oath. The prosecutor smiled kindly. "Mrs. West, can you tell the jury what happened on your 67th birthday?" I took a deep breath. I believed my daughter had betrayed me. The courtroom became completely silent. I described the tiny gift box, the locked doors, the strange phone calls, the fake bankers, the men who broke into my home, the silver key, Michael's hidden letters. I explained how Olivia had secretly gathered evidence while pretending to remain loyal to her husband. Then the prosecutor asked the question that mattered most. "Mrs. West, why did your daughter lock you inside your home?" I looked toward Olivia. She sat quietly behind the prosecution table. Our eyes met. I smiled, because she knew I would never lock the door against my own family. Several jurors nodded. One woman quietly wiped away tears. The prosecutor then introduced the recordings Olivia had made. Daniel's own voice filled the courtroom once again. There was no editing, no confusion, only his words, cold, calculated, deliberate. The defense tried to argue that Daniel had been pressured by Richard Collins. But under cross-examination, financial records showed Daniel had personally received substantial payments tied to fraudulent property transactions. Email correspondence revealed months of planning. Text messages demonstrated his active participation. The evidence spoke louder than any lawyer could. Later that afternoon, Agent Nathan Brooks testified. He carefully explained how the FBI had spent nearly a year building the case. Without Olivia's cooperation, many victims would never have received justice. He also revealed that several planned fraud attempts, including the one against me, had been documented through surveillance, recorded meetings, and financial tracing long before the arrests. Olivia had not acted recklessly. She'd worked closely with investigators every step of the way. By the time court recessed for the day, I felt emotionally exhausted. As I walked toward the hallway, someone gently touched my arm. It was the elderly widow whose photograph I had seen in Olivia's video. She smiled through tears. "I just wanted to thank you." I shook my head. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes," she replied softly. "If your daughter hadn't been brave enough, people like me would still be losing everything." Another victim joined us. Then another. Within minutes, I found myself surrounded by people whose lives had been forever changed. Not because of anything I had done, but because my daughter had refused to look away when she discovered evil hiding inside her own home. That evening, as Olivia and I left the courthouse together, she slipped her hand into mine, just as she had done when she was a frightened little girl crossing busy streets. I smiled at her. "You know," she looked at me, "your father would have been so proud of you." Her eyes immediately filled with tears. "I hope so." I looked up at the fading Texas sky and whispered silently, "So am I, Michael." For the first time in years, I felt that justice was no longer just a hope. It was finally within reach. 3 months after the trial began, the courtroom was filled to capacity for the sentencing hearing. News stations from across Texas had arrived before sunrise. Reporters lined the courthouse steps. Victims and their families quietly took their seats long before the judge entered. This wasn't simply another criminal case anymore. It had become a symbol of something much larger, the growing exploitation of elderly Americans by people they trusted most. I sat beside Olivia. She reached over and gently squeezed my hand. "Nervous," she whispered. "A little." "So am I." I smiled faintly. "Your father always said justice takes time." She nodded. And today, time finally caught up with them. A court officer announced the judge's arrival. Everyone stood. The room fell silent. Daniel and Richard were escorted into the courtroom in handcuffs before taking their seats beside their attorneys. Neither looked at the audience. Neither looked at the victims. Daniel appeared exhausted. His hair had grown longer. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. The confident businessman who once believed he could outsmart everyone was gone. Only a frightened man remained. The judge began by reviewing the convictions. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, financial exploitation of elderly persons, forgery, attempted theft by deception, obstruction of justice. participation in an organized criminal enterprise. Each charge carried serious penalties. The prosecutor then summarized the investigation. Over 4 years, Daniel's organization had targeted dozens of elderly homeowners across multiple states. Some victims lost retirement savings, others lost family farms. Several nearly became homeless after unknowingly signing fraudulent transfer documents. The emotional damage, the prosecutor explained, could never be fully measured. Then came something I hadn't expected. The judge invited victims who wished to speak before sentencing. An elderly veteran slowly approached the podium with the help of a cane. "My wife and I built our ranch together," he said. His voice trembled. "When she passed away, that land was all I had left of her." He looked toward Daniel. "You didn't just try to steal dirt. You tried to steal 50 years of memories." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Next came the widow from San Antonio. She held a framed PH, "I trusted people because that's how my husband raised me." She paused. "After what happened, I stopped answering my own front door." Her voice broke. "I forgot what it felt like to believe people were good." She returned to her seat as several family members embraced her. One after another, victims shared their stories. Each was different, yet painfully similar. Trust, manipulation, loss, fear, recovery. Finally, the judge asked if anyone wished to speak on behalf of the defendants. Daniel's attorney stood. He described Daniel as a first-time offender with a successful business career. He spoke about financial pressures, poor judgment, bad influences. Then he asked the court for mercy. When he finished, the judge turned toward Daniel. "Mr. Carter, you have the right to address the court." Daniel slowly stood. For several seconds he remained silent. Then he looked toward me. "I'm sorry." His voice sounded hoarse. "I never intended for things to go this far." The judge watched quietly. Daniel continued, "I made terrible decisions. I convinced myself I could fix everything before anyone got hurt." He glanced briefly toward Olivia. "I'm sorry for what I put my family through." Olivia remained expressionless. I wanted to believe him. Part of me truly did, not because I thought he deserved forgiveness, but because I hoped he finally understood what he had destroyed. Then the prosecutor rose once more. "Your Honor," he held up a folder. "We recently obtained additional evidence from encrypted communications recovered after the defendant's arrest." The courtroom became quiet again. The prosecutor opened the folder. "These messages were exchanged 2 days before Mrs. Emily West's birthday," he read aloud. "If she refuses to cooperate, we'll pressure her harder." Another message. "If she becomes a problem, there are facilities where nobody asks questions." A chill spread through the courtroom. The prosecutor continued. "These were not messages written under financial stress. They demonstrate planning, intent, and complete disregard for the victim's safety." Daniel closed his eyes. Whatever sympathy his earlier statement had created disappeared instantly. The judge carefully folded his hands. "I have presided over many criminal cases." He looked directly at Daniel. "But crimes against elderly citizens carry a particular cruelty. These victims spent their lives building homes, businesses, and families. You viewed those accomplishments not with respect, but as opportunities." He paused. "You weaponized trust." Then he turned toward Richard Collins. "You organized deception. You recruited others. You built a business around exploiting vulnerable people." The courtroom remained completely silent. Finally, the judge announced the sentences. Richard Collins received 28 years in federal prison. Several co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 8 to 22 years based on their roles in cooperation. Then came Daniel. The judge removed his glasses. "Daniel Carter, for your leadership role in this conspiracy, your abuse of family relationships, your repeated attempts to exploit elderly victims, and your continued dishonesty throughout these proceedings, I sentence you to 24 years in federal prison." A quiet gasp spread through the courtroom. Daniel lowered his head. He didn't argue. He didn't speak. He simply stood motionless as the reality settled over him. The judge wasn't finished. He also ordered millions of dollars in seized assets, including bank accounts, investment properties, luxury vehicles, and other recoverable proceeds to be placed into a restitution fund for verified victims. Although not every loss could be fully recovered, investigators had successfully frozen enough assets to compensate many of the families affected. The courtroom erupted into quiet tears of relief. Not celebration, relief. Outside the courthouse, later that afternoon, reporters surrounded Agent Brooks. He spoke briefly. This case reminds us that elder fraud often begins with someone pretending to care. He then surprised everyone by inviting Olivia to stand beside him. Without revealing sensitive investigative details, he publicly acknowledged her courage. Mrs. Carter accepted enormous personal risk to help stop an organization that had harmed many families. Her cooperation saved lives. Olivia looked overwhelmed. She wasn't seeking recognition. She had simply wanted to protect her mother. As we walked toward our car, several victims approached her one by one. Some hugged her. Others simply thanked her. One elderly gentleman placed his old military challenge coin into her hand. "I carried this for 30 years, he said. "I'd rather you have it now." Olivia immediately tried to refuse. He smiled. "No, you earned it." That evening, back on my porch, we watched the Texas sunset in silence. For the first time in a very long while, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since Michael died. Peace. Not because every wound had healed, not because every loss had been erased, but because justice had finally given all of us permission to begin again. A year passed more quickly than I ever imagined. The legal proceedings were over. The news cameras had disappeared. The reporters had moved on to other stories. Life, little by little, began to feel like life again. For the first time since Michael's death, I found myself making plans for the future instead of simply trying to survive each day. One crisp October morning, Linda Morales pulled into my driveway carrying a thick folder. She smiled as she climbed out of her car. "I've been looking forward to this meeting." "So have I admitted. We settled around my dining room table, the same table where Michael and I had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and countless family dinners. Linda spread several documents before me. "The property appraisal is complete." I took a deep breath. For months I had avoided asking the question, what is it actually worth? Linda adjusted her glasses before answering. Based on current commercial development in the surrounding area, just over $23 million. Even though I already knew the land was valuable, hearing the number aloud left me speechless. Michael had purchased that acreage nearly 30 years earlier for what many people had considered a foolish investment. Back then, it had been little more than rolling fields outside Austin. Now the city had expanded in that direction. Technology companies, medical centers, and residential communities surrounded the property. What had once looked ordinary had become one of the most valuable, undeveloped parcels in the area. I stared out the window. I wish Michael could see this. Linda smiled warmly. I think he planned for exactly this. She gently tapped the folder. He didn't protect that land because he wanted anyone to become wealthy. He protected it because he wanted you to choose its future. Her words stayed with me long after she left. That evening, Olivia came over with Lily. We sat together on the back porch watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold. Lily, now 11 years old, leaned against my shoulder while sketching in her notebook. "What are you drawing?" I asked. "A place." "What kind of place?" She smiled. "A place where grandparents never have to be lonely." I looked at Olivia. She looked back at me. Neither of us spoke. We were thinking the same thing. The following weekend, I drove out to Michael's land for the first time in years. The rolling hills looked exactly as I remembered. Wild flowers covered parts of the fields. Large oak trees stood proudly near a small creek. The breeze carried the familiar scent of cedar and fresh grass. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I could almost hear Michael laughing somewhere nearby. He had always loved this place, not because of its value, because of its peace. Olivia walked beside me in silence. Finally, she spoke. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I smiled softly, that your father would never forgive me if I turned this into another shopping center. She laughed. I completely agree. We continued walking until we reached the highest point overlooking the property. The view stretched for miles. It was beautiful. Then I remembered the elderly victims I had met during the trial, the widow who no longer answered her front door, the retired firefighter who lost his ranch, the veteran who believed he had lost everything his wife had helped build. I remembered their loneliness even more than their financial losses. An idea slowly formed. What if... Olivia looked at me. What if this land became something that helped people instead of making someone rich? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next several months, our lives became wonderfully busy. Architects visited the property. Community leaders attended planning meetings. Local charities offered suggestions. We listened carefully to everyone. Eventually, one vision emerged above all the others. A community center dedicated to older adults, not a nursing home, not an assisted living facility, a place where seniors could gather, learn, exercise, share meals, volunteer, and build friendships, a place where no one would ever feel forgotten. We decided to name it the Michael West Community Center. When I first saw the architectural drawings, tears filled my eyes. The main building featured wide front porches with rocking chairs. A beautiful library overlooked the gardens. Walking trails wound through the oak trees Michael had loved so much. There were classrooms for art music, computer literacy, and financial education. One room was specifically designed to teach older adults how to recognize fraud and financial scams. Agent Nathan Brooks even volunteered to help organize educational workshops. I've seen too many families destroyed by fraud, he told us. If education prevents even one victim, it's worth every minute. Olivia also discovered a new purpose. After everything she'd endured, she resigned from her previous job and established a nonprofit organization focused on protecting senior citizens from financial exploitation. She traveled throughout Texas, speaking at churches, libraries, and community centers. At first, standing before large audiences terrified her, but every time she shared our family's story, another victim found the courage to come forward. One afternoon, I quietly sat in the back row while she delivered a presentation. She never noticed I was there. I used to believe courage meant never being afraid, she told the audience. Now I know courage often means doing the right thing while you're terrified. The room erupted into applause. I couldn't have been prouder. Lily found her own way to contribute. She organized neighborhood children to create handmade birthday cards for seniors who had no nearby family. Every month, dozens of colorful cards arrived at local retirement communities. She called the project Grand Friends. Watching her reminded me so much of Michael. Kindness came naturally to both of them. One evening, as construction on the community center neared completion, I stood alone on the front porch of my house. The grandfather clock ticked steadily inside. The silver key still rested safely in the small wooden box on my mantel. It no longer represented fear. It represented trust. Trust between a husband and wife. Trust between a mother and daughter. Trust that had survived betrayal. Olivia quietly joined me outside. Thinking about Dad, I nodded. Every day. She slipped her arm through mine. I still miss him. So do I. We stood together beneath the evening sky, then she smiled. You know? What? I think he'd be proud that we're finally using his greatest gift exactly the way he hoped. I looked toward the distant lights where the new community center was almost finished. No, I answered softly. I think he'd say it was never his gift. It was always meant to become someone else's hope. For the first time in many years, the future no longer frightened me. It welcomed me, and I was finally ready to walk toward it. Exactly 1 year after my 67th birthday, I woke before sunrise. For a long moment, I simply lay in bed, listening. The house was quiet. No pounding on the doors, no strangers outside, no ringing phone filled with unknown numbers. Only the familiar rhythm of the grandfather clock downstairs. Tick, tick, tick. This time its steady sound brought me comfort instead of fear. I smiled. Good morning, Michael, I whispered toward the empty side of the bed. It had become a habit over the past year, not because I believed he could answer, but because saying his name out loud reminded me that love doesn't disappear simply because someone is gone. It changes, it lingers, it quietly becomes part of who we are. When I walked into the kitchen, I found a handwritten note taped to the coffee maker. Don't make any plans today. Love, Olivia and Lily. I laughed. They're planning something. The note made me think of the previous birthday, the tiny gift box, the locked doors, and the fear that had changed all of our lives. What a difference 1 year could make. Around 10 o'clock, a familiar SUV pulled into my driveway. This time, Olivia stepped out smiling instead of crying. Lily practically jumped out before the vehicle had fully stopped. Happy birthday, Grandma! She ran across the lawn and threw her arms around me. I hugged her tightly. You're getting too tall. I know, she said proudly. I'm almost as tall as Mom now. Olivia walked over carrying a covered cake box. I think we owe you a much better birthday than last year's. I laughed. I'd say that's a pretty low bar. She winced playfully. I deserve that. No, I said gently. You've already carried enough guilt. For a second, her smile softened. Then she reached over and squeezed my hand. Thank you. Instead of driving toward a restaurant, Olivia led me to the newly completed Michael West Community Center. I had visited during construction dozens of times, but seeing it fully finished took my breath away. The gardens were in full bloom. Wide brick walkways curved beneath enormous oak trees. The front porch stretched across the length of the building lined with handcrafted rocking chairs. Above the entrance hung a bronze plaque, the Michael West Community Center, where every generation finds a home. My eyes immediately filled with tears. You did this, I whispered. Olivia shook her head. We all did. As we entered the lobby, applause erupted. I froze. More than 100 people stood waiting. Neighbors, construction workers, volunteers, former students from my teaching days, Linda Morales, Agent Nathan Brooks, Mrs. Henderson, families from the community, and many of the elderly victims I'd met during the trial. Someone had organized a surprise birthday celebration. I covered my mouth. I don't even know what to say. Nathan Brooks stepped forward first. Mrs. West. He smiled warmly. A year ago, your birthday became the beginning of one investigation. He looked around the crowded room. Today, it's the beginning of something much more important. Applause filled the hall again. One by one, people shared short stories. The retired firefighter announced he had become a volunteer woodworking instructor. The widow from San Antonio now led a weekly grief support group. The military veteran who had once believed he'd lost everything smiled proudly as he introduced a financial literacy workshop designed specifically for seniors. Watching them laugh together felt almost unbelievable. A year earlier, many of them had been strangers, connected only by pain. Now they were building something together, hope. After lunch, Lily tugged gently on my sleeve. Grandma, I have something for you. I looked down at her smiling face. Another surprise. She nodded enthusiastically. This one's just from me. She reached into the pocket of her yellow cardigan and pulled out a tiny gift box. I stared at it. For a brief instant, my heart skipped. Olivia noticed immediately. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't realize. I smiled and shook my head. No, this is different. Lily carefully placed the little box into my hands. I wrapped it myself. I can tell. The ribbon wasn't perfectly straight. The corners were slightly uneven. It was absolutely perfect. Everyone around us grew quiet. Slowly, I untied the ribbon. Inside rested a beautiful silver house key attached to a small wooden keychain. Engraved into the wood were simple words. Home will always be yours. Tears spilled freely down my cheeks. I looked at Lily. What does this open? She grinned. Come see. She took my hand and led me down the hallway toward a quiet reading room overlooking the gardens. When she unlocked the door, I stopped in amazement. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls. Comfortable chairs surrounded a stone fireplace. Fresh flowers decorated every table. Above the fireplace hung a framed photograph of Michael smiling beside me many years ago. A small brass plaque beneath it read, "Emily's Reading Room," dedicated to every story that reminds us we are never alone. I turned toward Olivia. "You named this after me," she smiled through tears. "You spent 35 years teaching children to love books." She glanced around the room. "Now you'll help adults discover new chapters too." I couldn't speak. Instead, I hugged both of them, long, tightly, without letting go. Later that afternoon, as guests wandered through the gardens and children played beneath the oak trees, I slipped away to the front porch. The Texas sunset painted the sky in soft shades of gold and crimson. The breeze gently rocked the empty chair beside mine. I imagined Michael sitting there, smiling quietly the way he always had. "I think you'd like this place," I whispered. Behind me, laughter drifted from inside the community center. Music floated through the open windows. People who had once believed life had ended after betrayal were beginning again. And somehow, our family's greatest wound had become the foundation for healing far beyond ourselves. I reached into my purse. Inside were 2 keys. The old silver key Michael had hidden inside the birthday gift box, and Lily's brand new house key, engraved with words that brought tears to my eyes once again. One key had unlocked the truth, the other unlocked the future. As I held them together in my hand, I realized they belonged side by side, just like memory and hope. 1 week after my birthday, I unlocked the front door of the community center before anyone else arrived. The building was quiet. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, filling the lobby with a warm, golden glow. I loved these peaceful moments. Before the conversations began, before the laughter echoed through the halls, before the classrooms filled with people rediscovering purpose. I slowly walked past the art studio where watercolor paintings created by local seniors now decorated the walls. I passed the music room where an old upright piano had found a second life. Then I stopped outside Emily's reading room. The small brass plaque still made me smile. Not because my name was on it, but because every chair inside was usually occupied. Some people read, some wrote letters to grandchildren, others simply sat together talking over coffee. Loneliness had once been one of the greatest enemies facing many older adults. Now friendship quietly defeated it every day. As I opened the reading room door, I noticed someone already sitting inside. Olivia. She was looking at the framed photograph of Michael above the fireplace. "I thought I'd find you here," I said. She smiled softly. "I come here whenever I need to think." I sat beside her. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her purse and carefully placed a sealed envelope on the table between us. "I've been carrying this for almost a year." "What is it?" "A letter." "From who?" She looked down. "From me." I frowned slightly. "You could have just talked to me." "I know, but there were things I couldn't say until everything was over." I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Mom, if you're reading this, then we survived. For a long time, I believed the only way to protect you was to carry everything alone. I was wrong. I thought keeping secrets made me stronger. Instead, it nearly broke both of our hearts. The hardest moment of my life wasn't recording Daniel. It wasn't meeting with the FBI. It wasn't pretending everything was normal. It was locking the front door on your birthday while knowing you'd believe I had betrayed you. When I looked back through the window and saw you standing there, I almost ran back. I almost told you everything, but Agent Brooks reminded me that one mistake could destroy months of work and put you in even greater danger. So I kept walking. I cried the entire drive away. I don't know if you'll ever truly understand how much that hurt, but I hope you'll always know one thing. I never stopped choosing you, not for one single second. Love, Olivia." By the time I reached the end of the letter, my vision had blurred with tears. I folded it carefully. "You kept this all this time." She nodded. "I needed to know the nightmare was really over before giving it to you." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You know what I finally realized?" "What?" "On my birthday, You never locked me in. She looked at me with surprise. I smiled through my tears. You locked danger out. She covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. For a long moment, neither of us could speak. Then Lily burst through the doorway carrying a tray of cinnamon rolls. I knew I'd find you both together. She stopped when she noticed our tears. Oh no, did I interrupt something? Olivia laughed through her tears. No, you arrived exactly when we needed you. Lily set the tray down before hugging both of us at once. 3 generations standing together, no secrets. No fear, no locked doors between us anymore. Later that afternoon, the community center hosted its first anniversary celebration. More than 300 people attended. Some came for the music. Some came for the workshops. Others simply came because they finally felt they belonged somewhere again. Agent Nathan Brooks attended as a guest rather than as an investigator. Linda Morales smiled proudly as she watched seniors signing up for free legal education seminars. Mrs. Henderson coordinated the volunteer welcome desk with the confidence of someone 20 years younger. The retired firefighter taught woodworking classes twice each week. The widow from San Antonio had become one of the center's most beloved counselors. Watching everyone together, I understood something important. Justice had punished the guilty, but compassion had healed the survivors. When the celebration ended, Olivia asked everyone to gather outside beneath the large oak tree overlooking the property. This tree was already here when Michael West bought this land, she told the crowd. He believed some things become stronger simply because they survive. She looked toward me. My father protected this land. My mother transformed it. Then she surprised me by unveiling a small stone monument beneath the tree. It read, "In honor of Michael and Emily West. May every person who enters here find safety, dignity, and hope." I could no longer hold back my tears. The crowd applauded. Lily slipped her small hand into mine. "Grandma." "Yes, sweetheart?" "Do you still carry both keys?" I smiled. "I do." I reached into my pocket. The old silver key rested beside the newer house key she had given me. One represented the hardest day of my life. The other represented everything that followed. I held them together in my palm. For years, I thought the most unforgettable part of my 67th birthday was the moment my daughter locked the front door. I was wrong. The moment that truly changed my life came much later, when I finally understood why. Love doesn't always look gentle. Sometimes it asks impossible sacrifices. Sometimes it breaks your heart before it saves your life. That tiny gift box didn't simply contain a silver key. It unlocked the truth about my husband. It revealed the courage of my daughter. It exposed the greed hiding behind familiar smiles. And it opened a future I never imagined was waiting for me. If Michael were sitting beside me today, I think he'd simply smile and say the same words he always did whenever life surprised us. Time protects the truth. He was right. It always does. Life has taught me that the deepest betrayals often come from the people we least expect, but so can the greatest acts of courage. For a while, I believed my daughter had abandoned me. I judged her actions before I understood the burden she was carrying. That experience reminded me that we rarely see the full story behind another person's decisions. Patience, trust, and honest communication can sometimes save relationships that fear would otherwise destroy. Michael's wisdom protected our family long after he was gone, but it was Olivia's bravery that ensured his plans mattered. She risked her marriage, her safety, and even my trust to stop people who preyed on the vulnerable. Her courage became a reminder that doing the right thing is not always easy, and it is almost never comfortable. In the end, justice did more than punish those responsible. It gave survivors a chance to rebuild, to forgive, and to create something meaningful from unimaginable pain. The community center stands as proof that even our darkest chapters can become the foundation for hope if we choose compassion over bitterness. If my story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this: never underestimate the power of truth. Never stop protecting the people you love, and never believe that it's too late for a new beginning. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more emotional family stories with powerful life lessons. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you had been in my place, would you have trusted your daughter before knowing the truth? Wherever you're watching from, thank you for spending your time with me. Until next time, take care of yourself and the people you love.